All right, excellent afternoon to all those who are watching me across the states in Nigeria. One of the key attributes of the law is that it is all inclusive, which implies that there should be no separate, or will I say, no only cows in a society that binds us as Nigerians. However, part of the inclusivity of the law requires that it sits well with the majority of the people who are the machinery of the law. In a country like Nigeria, where women dominate in population, it is equally significant that women are part of the stakeholders making and upholding the law. Again, I welcome you to another interesting edition of Real Talk with Kiki. I remain your convener, your chief host, your executive producer, your script writer. Name it. I wear many hats on this platform. My name is Kiki Atanda-Owo. I think it's important for us to hear what's on this day initial segment as for us. When I return, I give my 2 cents on it. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Many thanks for staying with me. I think my takeaway from on this day initial segment today is just an historical landmark in the governance of Nigeria. Going through all of that, I felt that General Yakubu Gowon made this statement, and as a true leader in any war or battlefield, I think that the idea is not to label winners or losers, but also to uphold the greater good for the people. I think that's my takeaway from on this day initial segment today. It's important for us to get the message from my sponsors, those who have put me on this platform. When I return, we'll dive straight to the topic at hand. Stay with me. I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with me. Today is another episode as part of our International Women's Day 2025 series, where we showcase outstanding women who are breaking barriers, leading change, and making a lasting impact in their respective fields. And this year's International Women's Day's theme is Accelerate Action, highlighting the importance of action in terms of representation and access for women across all sectors. In line with this, today I turn my focus on legal profession and an industry where women continue to rise despite systematic challenges. And the first segment will focus on women's leadership in law, exploring the challenges and the triumph of women in the legal industry. And the conversation will address the gender gap in leadership, the importance of mentorship, and the steps that is necessary for us to continue to increase that female representation in senior legal position. And in the second leg of my show, the second segment of the show, I will be discussing, or I will shift the conversation to reforms, examining pressing issues such as access to justice for marginalized communities, and of course the impact of policy reforms in the Nigerian legal system. Joining me, he is a powerful house in the African legal space and beyond. A remarkable contributions have earned the prestigious national honor of Officer of the Order of the Niger, OON, amongst many other accolades. I will leave my guest profile to do the judgment to our personality. But before then, I think it's important for us to delve straight, into the guest profile, and we'll check it out together. And you agree with me that she's the right fit, to throw light on the issue. And stay with me. I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with me. I have my beautiful guest today. It's a pleasure to have you on Real Talk with Keke today. She is no other but Mrs. Boma Florence Alabi, OON. It's a pleasure. OON, son. Let me put it out there. It's a pleasure to have you on my platform, Real Talk with Keke Show. How are you doing today, ma'am?
Very well indeed, Keke. I'm happy International Women's Day to you.
Thank you so much. I wish you the same. So let's just dive straight to the issue at hand, because as the first female president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, going through your profile, I'm like, oh my God, this is very impressive. Your career has paved the way for, well, I say, many women in the industry. And while we have been, seeing a lot of notable female leaders in the law firm or in the law corridor of power, so to speak, such as, Chief Justice Aloma, I think Mukata or something. I don't know if I pronounced the last name properly. Yeah, and Justice Mary Odili as well. Yes. Women still remains, underrepresented, to be fair, in senior legal positions, because I was trying to see quite a number of names that I could, relate with. But I must ask you, what strategies do you think that we need to bring to fall in terms of implementation of further enhancement of female representation within the Nigerian legal system?
Well, it's good that you ask about strategy, because quite frankly, women have to be strategic about making it to the top of the profession. It doesn't happen by accident. Yeah. Nothing that is of any value happens purely by accident. You will have to be strategic about it. So to become the president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, an association of 54 lawyers from 54 countries, was something I had to be strategic about. I sat on the committee for a while. I served as vice president and then became president. Sadly, first and only female so far. I'm hoping that will change, because currently we have a number of female vice presidents. But coming back to Nigeria and then finding, there's so few female senior advocates of Nigeria, so few in a bar, I made it a mission that I would work towards getting elevated to the inner bar. And having done that, understood the process, I would then reach down the ladder and pull up as many women as I could after me. So I said 3 after me, and for each one of those 3, I said 3 after you. And that's beginning to happen. When I was elevated to the inner bar, I was number 20-something on the list. Now we're nearly 40, which is still a very tiny number in comparison to the in excess of 600, 700 in the history of the country. But it's beginning to grow, and I can see that happening even more. We've currently set up a group of female silks, and one of the key reasons for that is to try and bring up as many of our colleagues, female colleagues, as possible to join us in
Okay, many thanks for that insight, right? And I like the angle where you mentioned, 3 after me, 3 after them as well. So when we talk about justice reform, in Nigeria in particular, we often recognize legal icons like Anifara-Emi, Femi Falana, figures who have constantly, stood for justice, for democracy and the rule of law, so to speak. So you, Mrs. Boma, as a senior advocate of Nigeria and a pioneer of the legal, profession, I cannot help but ask you, do you think women in legal space are equally encouraged, in terms of how to push boundaries in political and economic and legal reforms? I like the fact that you said you formed a group where you can actually, encourage them, push them. But sometimes they feel like it seems as if they need that push themselves. So should we be seeing more female sons, take that center stage in advocating for systematic change, for what barriers, or maybe the question should be, what barriers do you think are still limiting the woman? Because sometimes, like I like to, use examples to illustrate my conversation. Our former president always said that the woman belongs to the other room. How do we change that narrative using a woman like you who have, broken the ceilings thus far?
It is true that we have a very patriarchal society.
Yeah.
And this patriarchy is imposed not just by the men, but the women who prefer the traditional way of things. And I approach this patriarchy by taking us back to history and saying, actually, our Africa, our Nigeria, our tradition was not patriarchal.
Yeah.
It came with the Victorian and Christian values. And then, of course, from the northern part of our country, the Muslim. Both of these religions are not African. They were brought to us. If you look at our real history and the way we are, we worked as equals. Men and women were partners in the African tradition, and that's what we've got to revert to. So I do not accept that it's traditional. I accept that perhaps it has become so because of these foreign religions, which we have inherited. But regardless, women must take their space. Nobody's going to give it to you. Late Chubal Kadibo said, power is not biscuit. It's not handed to you.
Yes.
You have to step up and take it. And in the course of that, they will throw all sorts of things at you. Sexual harassment is a reality in the workspace in Nigeria. Fact. I have a talk that I share with my younger female colleagues, which I call potholes on the road to success. It's as ubiquitous as potholes are in the Nigerian roads. But will that stop you from going to where you want to go? No. You learn to navigate and, if necessary, confront the predator and continue on your journey to success, because no one should be able to stop you because of your gender. And that's how you get to where you want to go.
All right, many thanks for that submission right there. When you mentioned sexual harassment has become a culture, that's what I'll use it, has become a culture in the workplace in Nigeria. I don't know if I should say about to differ, because I've shared my own perspective. I've never been harassed before, and I've climbed the corridor of power to where I am today. But that's another conversation, maybe at the second segment of the show. Don't even mix things together. But recently there has been significant discussion around the challenges that that have been faced by female legal practitioners, especially in Nigeria. I really want to focus on Nigeria right now, especially following the debate on gender bias in the judiciary and the legal profession as well. For instance, the case of this Justice Akon, and is it Ekone Ekpeme or something? I know I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name, but I think that happened in Cross River State. So who was initially as the chief judge due to political and gender-related consideration, and it sparked a lot of wildfire concerns about all those women face in rising to the top in our position. So with the recent judicial crisis in River State now, that has once again brought the challenges, that's what I want to use right now. I like to refer to all these problems as challenges, as a light concerning the political interference in Nigeria judiciary. The controversial conversation now is about the chief judge and conflicting courts rulings from different judicial levels that have raised different questions when you go to socials and the likes and all of that. But I must ask you now, Ma, from your own independence view, what do you think? How do we move forward? Do you align, with the judgment from the Supreme Court on this case, given that there's a lot of recurring challenges going on at the moment? What concrete measures? Maybe that's the word, because in whatever conversation we are having today, I'm of the opinion that we must always prefer solutions to the issues that's at hand. So what concrete measure can be implemented to safeguard the judiciary and that political interference that ensures that we remain at that pillar of democracy and justice in Nigeria? Because it seems as if there's so much kiosk all over the place.
Well, let's put it this way. The Supreme Court is made up of jurists, but they are human. And so it is not beyond error. However, that is the Supreme Court. That is the apex court. That's as far as it can go. So whatever the outcome of dispute that has gotten to the Supreme Court, that's the law that we have to live with. Nothing stopping us from going back to that court with, to look at some of these things again, if there are circumstances that justify it. But what I do say is, again, I think because of my background, having practiced in England and Wales, having been the president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, knowing what goes on in all 54 countries that were my constituents as the president of the Commonwealth Lawyers, the Nigerian Supreme Court is overburdened, grossly overburdened, and that needs to change. You cannot have 500 cases, 500 and something cases coming out of the Supreme Court and expect the level of rigor to the jurisprudence that you would have coming out of the Supreme Court of England and Wales, for instance, where you have perhaps 19 or 20 cases in the same space of time. It is just not humanly possible. I know, for example, with election petitions, because of the constitutional timelines, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, it might be less than a week before, within which they have to look at the case, read all of the records, form an opinion, and then hear counsel argue before them. It's just insufficient time. So we do have to change the system in order to get better jurisprudence from our courts. That's it.
All right, many thanks for that elaborate submission right there. And I like also the fact that you've emphasized that the courtroom or the judiciary is overburdened. Nigeria's legal system is unique in its integration of multiple legal framework. I know that there's English law, there's common law, there is customary law, and Sharia law as well. And when I was trying to do a bit of research coming in, all these laws, I was like, you can calm down. However, but this diversity, has often lead to legal controversies, particularly in the north, where, the application of Sharia law, has sometimes, been classified with constitutional provision and human rights concern. So cases as such as the sentence of, I think, Yahaya Sharif Amino, that was for allegedly blaspheming in Kano. I saw all of that at the time, and the legal debate surrounding that conversation was about schools being closed for 5 weeks in northern states. I also took that conversation on my radio program, I think last week or so. So I must ask you, Ma, how do you think that Nigeria can effectively harmonize these diverse legal structures to ensure that there's cohesive, or would I say fairness and sound judicial process that respects both cultural, legal, and maybe legal principles? Now, maybe that's the word I'm trying to put together.
Well, interestingly, in the family law space, there was a recent judgment that recognized the rights of wives under Sharia.
Okay.
In a marriage where there was a statutory marriage. So usually, the law says if you are married under the Act and you contract another marriage, that's bigamy. It's actually a crime. So,
for the man or for the female?
For both.
For both genders.
For both parties. And so it's interesting that this individual contracted marriages under Sharia law, and the court recognized the rights of the wives to inheritance, despite the statutory, the marriage under the Act. Yeah. I can see the humanity and the justice in that, in the sense that, well, these women were considered wives and ought to also inherit under their husbands, from their husband's estate. Particularly as he was a Muslim. Does the Act override his personal law, it does. So interestingly, the jurisprudence is moving away to, from would I almost say, from the law as it stands, and creating case law that changes the law. The legislative arm of government should pay attention to such cases and perhaps bring the law, the statutory law up to speed to align with the case law. Otherwise, we're going to have some confusion.
I think I get your point.
Yes.
Let's go on a quick break, and when we return, the conversation will continue. Please stay with me, I'll be right back. This is Real Talk with Kike. Many thanks, many thanks. There's so much conversation that happens when we go on the break. But glad to know you're still right there with us. If you're just tuning in, this is Real Talk with Kike, where we tackle national and global issues with leading voices in various industries. And today's episode is part of my special International Women's Day series. With me today is none other than Mrs. Boma Florence Alabi, OON San, a legal powerhouse. I like to refer to her, and the senior partner at the Primera Africa Legal and Champion for Judicial Reforms and Corporate Governance. Thus far, we've been having discussion, enriching discussion on women's leadership in law, evolving, role of female legal practitioners, and of course, the critical need for inclusivity in policies in the sector that concerns women a lot. Again, I want to say many thanks, Ma, for all that you've shared thus far, Mrs. Alabi. But you guys, for those who are listening to us right now, you can be part of this conversation by calling the studio number that will be showing on your screen right now. As our numbers have changed, so I do not know it offhand at the moment. So, and remember, we're streaming live on Facebook, both on Real Talk with Kike platform and on Silverbird platform. So, Ma, with all that you've shared thus far, I cannot help but bring the suspension of the Senate of Senator Natasha Akpoti, and following a sexual assault, accusation against the Senate president that has raised concerns all over the place. It's like a distraction to the country right now, if you ask me. But earlier when you were giving your submission, you spoke about how it has become a culture in most of the workplaces in Nigeria today where females are being harassed. But has it been fair from your own point of view with all that you've seen thus far? I think that's my first question to you right now, knowing that you've touched on it a little bit. Is there any reason for the women, or would I say women folks in general, to feel that there was a bias in the handling of this allegation of Senator Natasha Akpoti and the Senate President Akpabio himself? Or how should Nigerians now, what's the question, Nigerians' legal framework address the allegation of misconduct within its legislative bodies, to ensure that justice and accountability comes to fore? And my last question to you, do you believe that how a woman carries herself also predicts how she will be addressed?
Let me start with the last question. And that question is very important, because what tends to happen is the victim is blamed for being victimized. If a woman chooses to carry herself any way she chooses, that is her right. It's her body, not yours. Okay? I might not want to dress the way I see some ladies dressing.
I don't think the
I might
question,
not want to dress.
I apologize, I'm interrupting your thought process.
Yes.
I don't think the question is about dressing. I'm talking about how you carry yourself in terms of how you should be respected as a woman. Because earlier when you were talking, I told you that in my career path, I have risen from lower level to where I am today, and I'm still becoming the Kike that I'm envisioning for myself. And I'm saying to you, ma'am, I have never been harassed before. So I'm asking you that question. Do you think how a woman, carries herself in a place of respect also determine how, these men sometimes, in quotes, respect it?
To be honest, I do not believe that is the case.
Okay.
I think that men will have a go regardless. It can be subtle. And you then put a stop to it before it crosses the line into harassment. Right? Because your reaction will push you to say clearly, don't even try. If you attempt it, I'm going to shoot you down.
Yeah.
But that subtle initial step will happen regardless of whether you're wearing a ring
or not. I agree.
And I have seen it. And I have shut it down before it crosses any lines. So does it happen more in this society? Yes, it does. Remember, I've had the benefit of working elsewhere and working here. Here, they see it as, oh, I have the right to compliment you. You don't have a right to compliment me. Please do not speak about what I'm wearing. I'm not looking at you and saying, oh, you're looking good, you have a six-pack, or you have a fat tummy. Don't compliment me. Don't speak about my appearance. That in itself
is harassment.
Yes, it's gender.
Are you serious?
Yes, please.
Okay.
My gender should have nothing to do with me being in the room with you. In a workspace. It's in my home, that's fine. But not in my workspace. Don't expect me to make you tea or coffee. You're our mommy because you're the woman in the room. No.
So do you think there's a bias, or there's a feeling why, or there's a reason why the women folks, feel biased with the allegations or the handling of this allegation thus far?
So in terms of what has happened in the Senate, the sanction on the distinguished Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan is not about sexual harassment. It's actually about breaching the rules. They invited her for a hearing. The letter was dated the 5th of March. Hearing was on the 5th of March at 2 p.m. Then it was said that she didn't appear. And following on from that, the sanction was 6 months suspension from the National Assembly. Now, I have a problem with that process. I don't agree that due process was followed in the first place. The timing was too short from, issuing a letter in the morning and expecting an individual to be present by 2 p.m. That's one. Secondly, do they, a collection of her peers, have a right to suspend a representative of a constituent? She's not there in her personal capacity. She is representing a constituency. So you are effectively penalizing the entire constituency she's representing, because they will have no representation for 6 months while she's not sitting in the House. Do you have a right to do that? I don't think so. So I don't think they gave it sufficient thought. I think they crossed the boundaries. They acted ultra-virus, as we say in law, because constitutionally she has a right. She's been elected to represent her constituents. You might have a right to other sanctions, but not to deprive her constituents of representation.
I hear you loud and clear, Ma, and I think this will lead to my next question, knowing that in recent times, Nigeria has witnessed, several high-profile investigations and court cases involving prominent figures such as former CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, former Kogi State Governor, talking about Natasha Natu, that came to mind. That's Yaya Bello. Those cases have sparked a lot of widespread, debates over the handling of corruption traits in Nigeria today, and especially when it comes to selective prosecution and judicial, delays of judgments in Nigeria. So many Nigerians still question whether the legal system is being used for a tool or as a tool for justice or political vendetta. Because from your submission, what I'm hearing, subtle hearing, is maybe vendetta and being in a hurry to follow the professionalism of the Constitution or the system. How would you access, the handling of these high-profile cases thus far with just these few examples that I've put out?
Well, I wouldn't second-guess the courts. The reason being, I don't have a full picture of what arguments were canvassed.
So do you think that the legal system is equipped enough, in terms to ensure that there's fairness, there's unbiased or expeditious trials, or how will I put it that? Or maybe it's even structural reforms that we need to enhance for transparency and public trust in this judiciary.
To be perfectly honest, as a player in this legal system, as a senior advocate of Nigeria, who is an advocate, and I appear in courts right across the board, courts of record, I have to say that this system is broken. It really is that simple. Justice delayed is justice denied. You cannot go to court, start a trial, and finish it within a year. You can, but it's very, very rare. It is the exception rather than the rule, and it should be the rule rather than the exception. I have appeals that are pending 3, 4, 5 years from trial to Court of Appeal. I have appeals that are pending Court of Appeal to Supreme Court, some going back 7, 8 years. That is not justice. And I'm not blaming the judiciary. I am blaming the entire framework and how it is currently structured. We need to restructure it. We need to stop these interlocutory appeals. We need to have a situation where more judges are appointed. We need to, for instance, does everything have to go to the Supreme Court? Land matters.
That's a good question,
yes,
right there.
Land matters.
Does everything have to go to the Supreme Court?
Why is it going to Abuja? Why can't you finish it in Ekiti State, for goodness sake?
Yeah.
So these are the structural changes that we need for the system to work, for the benefit of all Nigerians, because people are resorting to self-help out of frustration with the legal system.
I think what your submission right now leads is a beautiful one, which leads to my question as a society that evolves, So must the legal system, I don't know how to put this question now, ensure that justice remain accessible, fair, and effective? Because when I hear you speak right now, I cannot help but to bring it to fall in Nigeria, the ongoing legal reforms that are critical, especially in areas of judicial anatomy, constitutional amendments, there must be change that must be brought to the judicial system with what we've shared thus far, the digitalization of the courts as well when it comes to court processes and the alternative disputes. I can keep going on and on when it comes to resolution mechanism and all of that. And the recent conversation as well, listening to you, is around this electoral law reforms, where the police reforms, I'm an extension of the police daughter, and I feel that the enforcement of anti-corruption laws, to be precise, it needs to be highlighted in my conversation today when it comes to the need of a more responsive legal, framework. So now, I must ask you, what key areas should be prioritized in the Nigerians' legal framework when it comes to us enhancing, the judicial delivery upon the rule of law, understanding that everything must not end in Abuja? Are there specific, legislative or policy changes that you feel that you need to advocate for, in terms of how cases should be handled, especially most significant impact on the legal landscape today that you think that is still affecting the female sector, so that we don't tilt away from the theme of the month, Yeah.
Yes. Well, one of the things I think we can change, and it will certainly benefit the women, because generally you find that women in the family space, generally speaking, the ones with less resources, less empowered, and so on. So you find that women stay in domestic violence situations where sometimes it costs their lives, and they ought not to be staying in those marriages or those relationships. But the ability to live and move on is sometimes impeded by access to justice.
Okay.
So the Matrimonial Act currently requires us to show cause why you should get a divorce. This act came from England, common law, where and based on Christian ethos. However, the country that gave it to us has moved on, and the current law is a no-fault divorce. Just the same way nobody asks you a question when you say, I'm going to marry. Nobody asks you a question when you say, I want to divorce. You know? And that makes it so much simpler for women to access justice. I said yes, now I'm saying no. I don't need to give you reasons why. I don't need to bring my dirty linen to the public and say how many times he beats me and my children have to have the shame of their father being named and shamed in this way. This stops a lot of women from actually coming forward because they look at what will people say, what will people think, and they stay and they die. But if I can just say, okay, I don't want again. I've said no, thank you. That's it. Within 5 weeks, you give me my divorce and I can move on.
It's not always 5 weeks back.
That could save, well, you get a decree nicely, and then after 3 months, you get a decree absolute.
Okay.
Yes, but it's been simplified to that extent in England because the law recognizes, it's individual rights and it's individual decision making. So the key thing is to make sure the children of the marriage are fairly, there's custody issues are dealt with, children's rights are paramount, the Child's Rights Act says so, and the best parent to parent them parents them, and then ensure that they're properly provided for. Beyond that, you two can go your separate ways. That, I think, will save a lot of lives if we're doing that here.
I wish we have all the time. I have questions for that because I was once upon a time a divorcee, and I know there are a lot of experiences that that took place during that period. But let me put that aside because it's not just about me today. So with what you've shared thus far, this might be my last question to you because of time before they start running commentary in my ears. Is the fact that I feel I need to emphasize on the role of legal education in professional development in Nigeria, which I feel is crucial because the continuous, legal education is vital for maintaining, that professional standards. Women like you, I must say that I'm truly, truly impressed with your profile and how you've impacted the society at large globally. It's very inspiring. So how can legal education now in Nigeria evolve, to a better preparedness for lawyers, in terms of contemporary challenges that we are going through at the moment?
Yes. Well, legal education is a very sound starting block. But any young lawyer who comes out thinking, I know it all, is a very foolish young lawyer.
Absolutely.
You have to keep learning and evolving and growing. But your training as a lawyer stands you in good stead to really go into so many other areas and so many other industries. For instance, I'm the chairman of the Shipping Lines Association of Nigeria. That is as a result of my legal training and background and the reputation I've built up in my profession. I chair the British Business Group. Again, that is a business group. It is not a lawyers group. And yet, my legal education and background comes in handy in playing that role. So our education is pretty standard in comparison to what we have in other jurisdictions. However, it's merely a starting block, and you have to continuously develop and continuously grow and build on that. The Nigerian Bar Association requires it from you, which is why we have CPD points. We have section on legal practice, which I chair, incidentally, of the Nigerian Bar Association, and that we constantly have webinars and trainings and so on. Section of business law and the rest of them.
All right, many thanks for all your submission thus far, and wish you the very best as you continue to navigate, the corridor of power, I like to call it now, being a woman who is holding that torch and representing us, professionally and perfectly. I must say again, I say thank you so much for creating time to do this with me. But before I let you go, there's this last segment on my show that we call Trending Stories. these are stories that binds us as Africans, as Nigerians, and this is where I have an opinion as a host, and the only trending story that we will be taking today, is that of the NAFDAC Director General, Mojisola Adeyeye, who counterfeit drugs worth 100 billion naira. And I think this is where I have to look at the camera. This is where you two have to look at the camera if you want to emphasize on your opinion right now. But first off, I really want to commend the NAFDAC Director General, that's Professor Mojisola Adeyeye, and the entire team of NAFDAC, because many times they're not just the only one working alone. They have a lot of team working with them. And I just want to say that she's doing a fantastic work. She's doing a good work, especially with this recent destruction of counterfeit drugs worth, over 100 billion naira. This is just in Idumota alone. What would the figures across Nigeria be? I ask in pain. This is a big deal, if you ask me. It's not something to be taken lightly. And we know that many people have suffered and even died because of these fake drugs and expired drugs. So the number of people dying from drugs-related illnesses, poisoning, and harmful effect of the substandard, medication. It's shocking, because for those who are listening to me, some people say drugs, no, medication, but it's still drugs in our own local pronunciation and understanding. So these people are not just statistics, guys. They are fathers, they are mothers, they are children, they are our families, they are our friends. And according to the United Nations, where counterfeit medications, pose as several risks, including treatment failures, adverse reactions, and even death. And I know that in sub-Saharan Africa, it's estimated that fake medication costs up to 500,000 deaths annually. When I saw this before coming to the studio, I was like, oh my goodness, there are so many cancer-related issues, kidney problems, kidney failures, liver issues that would have occurred as a result of fake and counterfeit drugs. So it's important for me to use my platform, for us to remember that the legacy of someone like Dora Akiyuli, that lives on the work that NAFDAC is doing right now today, where she fought hard to clean up Nigeria's pharmaceutical, industry, that, we shouldn't forget all of this. And it's great to see that the agency has continued, or is continuing our work with such, commitment and determination to eradicate, for lack of a better word now, these challenges that we have in our hands. So what saddens me most is the selfishness of the people who are profiting from these deadly medications, these deadly drugs. They are literally feeding off the suffering and the slow deaths of those who are consuming those medications, those drugs, which often leads to, harmful dealings of human lives. So these people don't care about the lives that they are destroying. So as Nigerians, as a collective people, I believe that we must, continue to support agencies like NAFDAC and the work that they are doing, and stand up against these wicked individuals, in the drug business, in the medical sector. They are not just criminals, I must emphasize. They are murderers in the eyes of those families who lost their loved ones because of their greed. So NAFDAC, the police, and other concerned agencies have been working tirelessly to stop these illegal activities. But it's time for us as individuals. It starts from our home. I keep referring to our home because the home is the foundation of our character. So we must come together to make sure that we clean up our system. We cannot afford to stay silent and look the other way. Everyone has a role to play in this issue. If we don't come together as a people, ma'am, I believe that there will not be any regard for human lives anymore. All the names of people I've called earlier will never come to fore, because everybody is after making money. We all live to pay bills, but this fight is far beyond over. But I must emphasize that the awareness, the vigilance, and the support for the agencies, we must come together. We can see a day when the wickedness is fully wiped out. Until we see that day when the wickedness is fully wiped out, then we will say that we have come to a place of change, we have come to a place of rest. Let's be part of that change. Let's ensure that our people are safe from this dangerous product that has been put out there. Again, I want to say kudos to the chairman of NAFDAC and all our team out there doing a wonderful job in making sure that we all stay alive. Quickly, ma'am, what's your take on this?
I totally agree with you. Anybody who trades in fake drugs is a murder. You use that word, and I agree with you 100%. So do not trade in fake drugs. You could be killing your own family. Then you don't know where those drugs will end up, which hospital, which pharmacy, and so on. Kudos to Professor Mojisola of NAFDAC. Again, women leading from the front.
Women leading from the front. This is Professor Mojisola
Accelerate action. Let's have more women leading, and we see the difference that they make in our society. Very positive difference.
All right, many thanks for lending your voice on issues that affect us, and of course, for creating time to spend your lunch time with us on this platform. Really, really grateful for that. Thank you so much for honoring my invitation. Despite the short notice, I'm grateful, and I wish you the very best as you continue to navigate the corridor of power in Nigeria and beyond. Again, I want to say many thanks again to all those who have been watching us. Courtesy our resourceful guests, we've had a fantastic show. Mrs. Boma, Florence, Alabi, OON, San. Thank you so much for coming. My name remains Kikelomo Atanda-Owo. Abati. Bye now.